tariffs, you signed it on camera with a flourish. It was like executive order style. Have you learned an element of performance, like you have to be seen to be doing the job in a certain way? Because it didn't feel very Canadian.
Carney has made more concessions today. Welcome back to Moose and Lose. My name's David. Today we got Mark Carney not only conceding to Donald Trump, but also conceding to China. He does an interview in London on Bloomberg TV and spills the beans about a lot of stuff here. Let's jump into this. So starting this one off here, we got Mark Carney getting asked if he used Donald Trump to get elected. Look at this cheeky little banker smile here. He couldn't help it. He couldn't help himself.
Did you get elected because of President Trump, really?
I got elected, well... You'd have to ask the voters of Canada.
But look at this guy. He knows full well he used a dirty tactic to get elected.
I think...
Well, you stood because of President Trump, didn't you? You made the choice just before you announced it, just before the inauguration.
I did not stand because of President Trump. No, I stood because I believe that the person who was likely to become prime minister, certainly in all the polling, was not the right person for Canada, that would have been a divisive government in that case and would have taken our country back as opposed to forward. Turned out to be the case that very quickly, once I was in the leadership campaign, before I became leader of the Liberal Party and then before the general election campaign, it turned out that President Trump's actions in the trade war, as it's known, really intensified. And then I became more relevant. So certainly, yes, it helped that people made a judgment that I was best placed to deal with it.
Yeah, this guy just saying that Pierre Poilievre would have taken us back and not forward. And look at all the industries collapsing. Even on CBC, they're talking about how bad it is.
We have to change the game. We're not going to keep Stellantis, for example, here by throwing subsidies at them. And we're certainly not going to keep them by threatening them with lawsuits. The only way you're going to get investment to locate in a permanent way in the country is if we're such an attractive destination for investment that they'll do so even in the face of whatever Donald Trump throws at them. So we've got to be thinking about a much larger game of how do we make ourselves so attractive as a location for investment that we're not having to basically fight with one arm tied behind our back. We can't fight the Americans on tariffs. We can't fight them on subsidies. We can fight them on overall competitiveness.
What happened to elbows up? But I mean, he's not wrong there. I mean, that's what's happening here. I've said this so many times. We have to make Canada so attractive that businesses want to do business here. Yet Mr. Banker thinks that Pierre Poilievre would have taken us back and he's taking us forward. Your record doesn't agree with you, Carney.
What do you miss about your old life? I imagine your family probably miss your old life.
Yes, I'm sure they do. I miss, what do I miss about it? I miss having any privacy, basically.
Privacy, like this kind of lack of privacy. I mean, you make your bed, you sleep in here, Carney. If you were a squeaky clean prime minister and there was no connections here, there would be nothing for me to dig into. People have asked me to dig into Pierre Poilievre. There's nothing there. Poilievre doesn't have a list of scandals to go through and connections and all sorts of suspicious ties. You made your own bed, Carney. Listen to this. So he gets asked about America's economy here. And the way he responds to this, saying he wants a strong American economy, it just comes off a little too cavalier, a little too casual.
What is your strategy for when the US-Mexico-Canada trade deal is reviewed next summer? Are you hoping the US economy by that stage is in a position where President Trump takes a different view on tariffs?
We want the best for the US economy, just as we want, slightly stronger, we want the best for the Canadian economy, but...
We want the best for the U.S. economy. Or do you want the best for your own stocks, 91% invested in America? And this guy's poker face is awful. Like, there's no hiding this, Carney. Just come out and say it. I want America to do great because I'm invested there.
Slightly stronger, we want the best for the Canadian economy. But so no, our strategy is not to expect some weakness in the U.S. economy that is going to change U.S. negotiating position.
Next up, she drills down on him with the DST, giving concessions to Trump, getting nothing in return. And this is more of the same, him taking credit for the Kuzma negotiations that were done years ago.
In February, when you were campaigning, we're going to stand up to a bully, we're not going to back down. And yet, now you're much more likely to talk in more conciliatory terms. I mean, obviously, one is campaigning and one is governing, but perhaps people who wanted you to do the standing up to the bully might feel that you haven't done that as much as you suggested when you were campaigning.
Well, let's be clear the actual situation. We're one of, there are two countries effectively that put retaliatory tariffs on the United States. Two countries in the world. We put them on, we kept them on up to a point where they ceased to be effective. We got to a point when we took our retaliatory tariffs off, we had 85% of our trade tariff-free. when we put them on, given the steps that President Trump had taken, it was a third of our trade was tariff free. So, strikes me that that's pretty effective.
But
number
he has
one.
shown his power, hasn't he, over you? Like, for example, your digital services tax. You announced it. He hated it. You had to back down on that.
The digital service tax was announced multiple years before. It was just effectively coming in. It was coming into effect. Look, the United States.
And it couldn't, because President Trump wasn't having it.
We made a decision in the context. And what happened after we took that digital service tax off? Within weeks, the president confirmed in writing, formally confirmed in an executive order, that tariff-free status for the vast majority of our trade.
There's something broader at stake.
There's something
trade. I get that. I get that, but I just wonder how you reconcile yourself to that, because it is different from the tone you struck before.
I reconcile. My responsibility is to get the best possible deal for Canada. We have the best deal in the world at this.
So basically, he's not going to get a deal because we already have the best deal in Canada. That's basically what he just said. Just listen again.
My responsibility is to get the best possible deal for Canada. We have the best deal in the world at this point. Now, that next issue is, where is the USMCA negotiation going to land? Yeah, the trade agreement, the broader trade agreement is going to land, and that's being prepared for that and working with the U.S. in that. But let's be absolutely clear: the United States does have tremendous leverage in the near term over Canada, over the European Union, over the United Kingdom, because our economies became linked on the basis of certain assumptions. Those assumptions have now changed, and so part of this is stabilizing that relationship. It's the U.S. right to have different priorities. We respect that they've made that choice. We look to stabilize the trading relationship. Okay, what are the new terms under the new objectives of the United States that are in the best interest of Canada? And then...
But yeah, he just stated Canada already has the best deal, and that's what he's setting out to get. We already have the best deal. So he's essentially admitting we're not going to get a deal because it's better for America and his stocks? His 91% invested in America? This guy's unreal.
The big thing that we do, and a big part of, I think, why I was elected, was what else are we going to do? And one of the core points that we've made from the start is that we can give ourselves far more than the United States can take away.
This slogan again, this guy, and I've cut out a bunch of this stuff, he keeps using these slogans. He goes after Pierre Poilievre for slogans, and he just keeps using these stupid, dried up, tired slogans. We can't give ourselves more than America can take away. That is not true at all. Canada will crumble if we don't have America. That's just the facts of it. So in a turn of events here today, what are we seeing? Mark Carney's dropping more tariffs on America and China. He's dropping tariffs on Chinese steel. How's that for steel workers in Canada? Carney just stabbed our steel workers in the back.
Now to the impact of Donald Trump's global trade war. The U.S. president just signed off on 25% tariffs on medium and heavy truck imports starting next month. Now there are exemptions for vehicles compliant with a CUSMA free trade agreement. But there are new questions over Canada's response to tariff threats. Mackenzie Gray joins us from Ottawa. Mackenzie, it appears the Carney government has quietly dropped more levies.
After dumping the vast majority of the counter tariffs on the U.S., and Mark Carney's elbows have come even further down with a new 100-page order, dropping some counter tariffs not just on the U.S., but also on China. Tariffs on China go back to last summer, put in place by Justin Trudeau at the request of the Biden administration. But now dozens of certain types of Chinese steel and aluminum can enter Canada without tariff, a significant disappointment for the Canadian steel industry.
We're going to see a spike of Chinese steel in the country, which is not good because we need to decouple from China, and we've been on the right path, but this is not helpful right now.
Tariffs on many U.S. products are also being cut, including on some steel and aluminum, but also on goods in the healthcare, public safety, and national defense sector, and even on granular products like portable pizza ovens and certain wines. Specific companies are also getting carve-outs, including an Ottawa purpose-built rental construction project that's getting rolling steel doors tariff-free.
A lot of the steel that we receive in Canada, what we import in Canada, 80% of it could be replaced with Canadian steel.
reducing tariffs, the opposite approach compared to what the Ontario Premier wants. But the Prime Minister made it clear this week he wasn't taking Doug Ford's approach.
There's times to hit back and there's times to talk, and right now is the time to talk.
Those talks have been ongoing with Canadian government officials and Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc in Washington. When asked by reporters on Friday, a U.S. administration official refused to discuss what's being negotiated. But Mark Carney did give slightly more information.
We're engaged in deep negotiations, intensive negotiations on several sectors of the Canadian economy, energy, aluminum, and the steel sectors.
While intensive negotiations may sound promising, it's a line we've heard before, including from the Prime Minister in late July.
The negotiations are at an intense phase. It's a complex negotiation.
And those negotiations have led nowhere. One of multiple dates that Carney had set to get a deal with the U.S., which have come and gone with no results. But this time, the rookie politician seems to have learned his lesson, Anne, with the Liberals now not willing to set a deadline for when or even if a deal can happen on sectoral tariffs.
The tone on global news here has changed. They're just scathing, dishing it straight here to Carney. So Carney, what is he getting in return, giving up all these tariffs? Still have our canola sector getting absolutely hammered by China, but let's lift a bunch of those tariffs. Here you go, China. Here you go, Trump. Keep just giving it away with nothing in return. Carney is the worst negotiator in Canadian history. Now, I'm not a fan of tariffs, but Carney needs to be getting something in return if China's hammering our canola industry, for example. You can't just remove them and get nothing in return. It has to be a give and take here. Drop them on both sides. Drop the Chinese EV tariffs. I mean, there's no point in having them. We don't have Chinese EVs in Canada. Now, would we get a flood of them? Maybe, but for right now, we should drop that and get our canola industry, seafood industry back on track. It doesn't make sense to have that in place when that industry doesn't even exist in Canada right now. If it becomes a big problem later, then we can deal with it later. But for now, we might as well save an industry that actually exists today. Canada's leadership is pathetic. Yep. So digging around here as of right now of filming this, I can't see Carney getting anything in return.
You've clearly had a really intense few months and you've made clear what you're up against, right? Yeah. Canada prospered under the old world and we're not going back to the old world. How long do you plan to serve?
That's a great question. I think that I'm in a minority position, or my party is.
I was about to say he looks nervous there, and that's why he laughed. And the first thing out of his mouth, he's in a minority government, so he has no idea. He's hoping to keep this grift going, but he knows full well that Pierre Poilievre is right on his heels there and about to take the throne and finally fix Canada.
In a minority position in Parliament, we ran on a very strong mandate. In other words, going to do big things that we're going to put the country build the country strong.
But I think you made such big pledges that it's hard to imagine that you could fulfill them in less than a decade. So I imagine you do want to serve 2 terms. You want to build a huge number of houses. You've made a big pledge on defense spending. You're in a tight economic framework where growth is hard to find.
Well, it's a democracy, and you have to ask permission from voters for the time served. I think what's essential, again, we are in a crisis. We're in an economic crisis, this fundamental shift in the world, and we make this point, and I'll make it again. It's not a transition, it's a rupture. It's big changes in a very short period of time.
This guy's unbelievable, saying we're in a democracy and then use fear tactics to get elected. And then right away he talks about it's a rupture, trying to fearmonger and scare Canadians. Once again, it's a rupture, trying to make it seem like Canada is bleeding out. It's colorful language, but I mean, really, this guy not getting a deal? We were starting to crumble. And it's not because of Donald Trump. It's because of 10 years of awful liberal rule. And then cap that with another liberal prime minister who's not getting a deal. And as you heard earlier, he already thinks he's got the best deal, the deal of Kuzma that was already in place. Sounds like he's not getting a deal at all, and he doesn't care.
On the auto industry front, we do have 2 advantages that no American administration can take away. The dollar is lower, and healthcare. If you're going to negotiate work contracts and invest somewhere, it's a lot less costly to do so in Canada. These have been advantages we've had for decades. As for what the strategy is, I agree with the sense of panic, but I also think that this is a government that is now becoming more political than policy-oriented, and what they're trying to get is a win, any win, before, as soon as possible, and ideally before the budget.
Okay, we're going to leave that part of the
not necessarily a win. You know, like that's the thing.
something that's
something
that's not a loss.
I did say this was about politics and not about policy.
Look at this. Carney's become a laughingstock on the CBC. That's how bad he's losing. They're laughing at the guy not getting anything done. Even Rosemary Barton's laughing.
I did say this was about politics.
I can't believe this. Look at this.
And not about policy.
And I know from all my experience that in those situations, you have to act big, you have to act bold. That is what we're going to do. The politics will favorably or unfavorably will result from that. But I don't want to be in a position, however long I serve, where I didn't do what I didn't think was necessary at the time. I need to do what I think is necessary.
And what is at stake if you don't succeed? We're in an age of rising populism in many countries. In Canada, the old acceptance of immigration has changed a lot and anti-immigrant sentiment is rising. Do you fear the spectre of populism? Because you've said populists don't know how to run economies.
That's true. They know how to talk about it, but they know how to run economies down. I think I'll answer the...
What does this guy know how to do? Our economy is tanking right now. Mr. Banker, please save us. No thanks. This guy has probably had one of the worst first 6 months of the prime minister in Canadian history. He talks about populists running the country down, but don't worry. He's really smart. He knows what he's doing.
Question this way. We're doing big things. We're building the economy. And what's important is how we're building as well. We're building... For example, with Indigenous Canadians, there were in these major projects, there will always be Indigenous participation in the ownership. We are building in an inclusive way with unions. We're creating hundreds of thousands of high-paying, skilled careers. So when I announced...
No, hundreds of thousands of high-paying careers are going to America. This guy says this when Stellantis just announced $18 billion to America and 3,000 jobs leaving. He can't be serious.
Our energy projects, a huge swath of clean energy projects, anything in other sectors is top quartile or top decile in terms of the lowest carbon emissions.
But are you optimistic about all of this? Because everything that you're signaling these are very hard roads to go down where there are a lot of high expectations. And arguably your chances of delivering certainly in the next 5 years are probably relatively low. So where do you find the optimism?
Well, I think that I know that Canadians recognize the scale of the challenge. They want the government to act. They feel fundamentally that we need to take care of ourselves. That's building for ourselves, and it's diversifying around the world, and they're fundamentally supportive of that. We have to deliver. Canadians are not unrealistic people. They know it won't change overnight, but they need to see us doing everything we can to make sure that it changes for the medium term.
Can we bring
What's interesting, him saying they need to see us change for the medium term. Earlier on in the interview, she asked him about optics and whether he does things for optics, and he basically said, yeah. He admitted that they'll do things. She brought up the example of him signing the official letter to axe the carbon tax when really that letter didn't do that, but he admitted to doing that just as it's optics so Canadians can see him doing something physical towards that action versus how it's actually done in Parliament and not with an executive order like Trump would do.
I've wondered about the way that when you cancel the carbon tax, you signed it on camera with a flourish. It was like executive order style. Have you learned an element of performance, like you have to be seen to be doing the job in a certain way? Because it didn't feel very Canadian to do that, the signing on camera with a flourish.
I think that, I don't know it's interesting. I wouldn't have ascribed it to him per se. I just think that in a time when there is a lot of pressure, people are under a lot of pressure, there's a lot of uncertainty, the value of being very clear. So I'll take the example you used. That was the first day that I became prime minister. The first thing we did was to cancel that carbon tax. The next thing I did was to come to Europe, come to the UK and to the Canadian Arctic, the three founding peoples of Canada, the French, the British, and the Indigenous Canadians. But when you're in a crisis, particularly, in this case, a trade crisis, an economic crisis, a crisis of sovereignty, given some of the points that President Trump is saying about the 51st state, when you're in a crisis, you need to not just act decisively, but be seen to act decisively. And that's what we were doing.
You not only need to act decisively, but be seen to be acting decisively. He's well aware of optics, how he appears to Canadians. This isn't Justin Trudeau anymore. This isn't some dumb surfer instructor. I'm not saying surf instructors are dumb, but I'm saying Trudeau is. We're dealing with a different animal here.